first topic of your 49ers. So Fred Warner signed a 5-year, $95 million extension, $40 million guaranteed. The breakout's a little interesting because the first few years the cap hit isn't bad, and then after a while, that's when it kind of starts kicking in. I feel like the Niners do that a lot, though. I mean, I could be wrong here, but I want to say they did that with Kittle as well, kind of
Yup.
pushing his down the road.
And
Did they
Eric
do the
Armstead.
Armstead as well?
Yup.
And then Trent Williams was the guy who I think his is kind of the opposite. His is more front loaded, I want to say.
If I remember correctly, I'm not looking at his contract right now. He had a lot of guaranteed money up front, but
That's
they
what it was, yeah.
backloaded his cap hits as well.
Okay, it was
So I think
the guaranteed was a lot up front. Like I think if you cut him, it'd be like 40 or it'd be an obscene amount of dead cap like the first year or two.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I want to get your thoughts on this, Vish. What did you think about the deal and what are your like main takeaways from this Fred Warner extension?
So obviously this was something that needed to happen this offseason for the 49ers. I mean, I must say I was slightly worried about it. Not that I didn't think they could get it done. I just wanted to get it done quickly because this is one of those things that you don't want lingering. I mean, Fred Warner, he's started every single game since he's come in the NFL, 48 straight starts. He's as good a linebacker as there is in football. He's, in my opinion, the best one in coverage. I can understand if you want a more physical linebacker because, there are a few guys like Darius Leonard, Bobby Wagner that are a tad more physical than my man Fred Warner, but he's as good in coverage as it gets. He's good in man, he's good in zone, he's really smart. He's the leader of the 49ers defense. He was the leader of a defense that, in spite of having injuries all over their defensive line, all over their secondary, they were the fifth best defense in football. A lot of that was because they had Fred Warner as their middle linebacker. So the accolades with Fred Warner is like, yeah, he's one of the two or three. I think he's the best, but he's one of the two or three best guys at his position in the NFL. There's no doubt about it. But I think the important detail, and I know you're going to get into the details of the contract a bit more and your thoughts on that. So I'll let you go for that in just a second. But to me, the most important thing was the fact that they signed Fred Warner before Roquan Smith got his deal and before Darius Leonard got his deal. Mm-hmm. I personally think Fred Warner is a superior football player to the two of them. But I think that this is one of those situations that all three are kind of in the same conversation where the player that got signed last was going to get the most money. And the 49ers first reset the market with Fred Warner. And however expensive this deal with Fred Warner looks right now, it's not going to look that expensive 2 months from now because the Roquan Smith and the Darius Leonard deal are most likely going to eclipse this by a tad amount. Fred Warner obviously was able to eclipse Bobby Wagner. So I think from that standpoint, that to me was my biggest takeaway. Like the 49ers, they're really good at getting contracts done. And it's really nice that they were able to get this contract done first.
Yeah, I'm with you with the getting the contract done first because you save yourself money, right? And
right.
I think there's two different views on this, and some teams will do like a contract like middle of the season and extend them way, way early. And I feel like in that times, like it can sometimes come back to bite them because if the guy maybe they overjudged how good he was. If they give him a contract, before the season and he ends up not being as good as they thought he'd be, that's an issue. But it was after the season. He's continued to play great. I know their yards are top 5. Would you say they were a top 5 defense last year? I know that's how their yards metrics were. I know their points were like 16th. Their points were middle of the pack.
Yeah, and I think the points, to be fair on the points, I would say if I wouldn't call them, a top 5 defense. I think there were a couple of defenses lower than them that I would maybe put ahead of them.
Yeah.
They were ranked 5th in terms of yards. I still thought they were, bar none, a top 10 defense. I think the point stat is a little misleading because they were put in a few bad spots because their offense did turn the football over quite a bit. They did have Nick Mullins, who did have a very turnover-prone season while playing quarterback. So from that standpoint, I think the points is a little bit misleading. I think the yards is also maybe a little bit less than what it should be because they did play Dwayne Haskins for an entire half, and he couldn't move the ball in half an inch that entire half. So I think that helped. So overall, I would say if you had to rank them based on who they had last year in the defense they had with Saleh calling the plays, somewhere 7 to 10 to me is fair.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not to say that their defense is like bad, but yeah, they still had an above average defense, right? And he's the main reason for that, I would say. Because you mentioned the injuries and what that'll do, but he kind of he helps make up for it. And I just wanted to get into one thing too that I kind of noticed. And that's with like the scheme, like running a cover three, like the Seattle scheme, right? Your linebackers need to be good in coverage because there's a lot of pressure on them to be excellent. And with
Right.
Seattle, it worked because Bobby Wagner's Bobby Wagner. He's been an All Pro for the whole decade, pretty much, from what it
And
seems.
KJ Wright's really good
You're
in
right.
coverage.
Yeah, and it's only two of them, so they're relying a lot on like how good they can be in that scheme. So I think that goes to show like the fact that they can run that defense successfully. If your linebackers aren't good in coverage, it won't work. It's really that simple. So he allows them to do that and do it at an extremely good level. The next point I wanted to bring up was kind of an interesting point, and it's not to be negative on it, but I just thought this was more interesting than anything. When you break down the average amount each linebacker is paid and just the defenses that they're on, it's pretty weird because, linebacker's not, I guess, considered a premium position. Usually you would say edge or cornerback or tackle or quarterback. Those are like the considered quote unquote premium positions, but just here's the highest linebacker's average value per year. So Wagner's first or Warner's first at 18.5, Wagner 18, CJ Mosley 17, Zach Cunningham 14.5, Miles Jack 14.25, Deion Jones 14.25, and then Corey Littleton 11.75. I just found it interesting how most of these defenses are like average at best. Like I don't think any of those defenses are top 10. And that to me was interesting and thinking like you would think like, if you have a really good linebacker that can cover for other areas. And I guess, having the highest paid one doesn't mean your linebacker is good, right? Like some of those guys aren't top 5 linebackers. But yeah, I just thought that little tidbit was interesting when looking at it, and kind of like how Wagner and Warner are like 4 million above the next guy, which is like a lot, obviously, but they're just that good. So you have to pay them what the market demands. Um, so I just thought that was interesting. But yeah, I'm with you for the most part on they had to get this done. You don't let players of his caliber walk, all pro players, because they don't grow on trees, especially at the linebacker position. I feel like over the years, linebacker has been one of those positions where if you don't have a good one, yours is probably not all that good. Like there's a fine line between a good linebacker and a bad linebacker. And with offense becoming more complex with all the play action and all like, the pre-snap movements, it makes having a linebacker that doesn't get tricked by that stuff even the more valuable. So that's just like my 2 cents on it. And I think linebacker is becoming a more premium position as the years go on. Because you look at the defenses with good linebackers. I mean, you saw what the Buccaneers did with 2 of some of the best. So just goes to show.
Yeah. I think that's part of it. I wanted to touch on your point about, the linebacker market growing. I think CJ Mosley, so Miles Jack, Deion Jones were the 2 that got signed, I think, before 2019. I
Yes.
think CJ Mosley was signed as a free agent that offseason. So obviously that his contract is skewed by that. And then Bobby, I feel like got extended one more time very recently.
His third contract. This is his third
And
contract.
it was very recent. He did it as his own agent and all of that. Just for reference, because you talked about how linebacker is becoming more of a premium position and how much the market is growing. So, for example, Fred Warner has made one All-Pro team and one Pro Bowl so far. That's his, I guess, in terms of accolades. It's not everything, but I think it does have something to do with contract
Mm-hmm.
negotiations, just because it's something you can point to. Like, this is something I achieved. Like, it's part of it. Well, at this same point in his career, when he signed his second contract, Patrick Willis had made four straight Pro Bowls and was a 3-time first team All Pro in 4 years. Do you know what Patrick Willis's extension was? And this was in 2011.
Probably like half of it. Like I don't
Yeah,
even.
it was 5 years.
Cap was way, way different at that point too.
Right. He made 5 years, $50 million with $20.3 million guaranteed. That was his contract. So an average about 10. That's crazy because Fred Warner doubled his contract. Well, Navarro Bowman comes along, 2012. He was an first team All Pro in 2011. He gets his first contract extension. He was 5 years, $45 million with $16.67 million guaranteed. To
Mm.
me, it's just crazy how much the market is growing. And you talked about how it's becoming more of a premium position. Well, yeah, it seems to be that way because we talked about it earlier, right? Fred Warner's the first of Tremaine Edmonds, Roquan Smith, Darius Leonard. All of these guys are going to get paid some capacity in some capacity. Now, not all of them are going to touch Fred Warner's deal, but they're going to be right there, right
He'll be
near in
right
that.
there, I think, if
Right, they're
not
going to.
more, because they're if you're top five, top eight at your position, you get paid like your top three. That's just how the market works. You reset the market if you're that good.
Right. And not to mention, you talked about the average annual salary, how there's a drop off. You go Fred Warner, Bobby Wagner, CJ Mosley, and then you go
Wow.
down to Zach Cunningham, that 4 million drop
Yeah.
off. They're about to fill that gap, I think.
Yeah, they'll be. I think they'll be just right. Like I can honestly see Leonard being the highest paid when he gets his contract up, because he does have the accolades, right?
Right.
Yeah,
And
it'll be close.
Roquan Smith will probably be maybe like 17, 18 million. Tremaine Edmonds, I think, will be the guy that's
He'll be
15
the
to
filler guy
16. Yeah.
probably. Yeah, I'm with
But
you on that.
yeah, it's crazy how the linebacker market is growing. And it's really simple because you talked about it. You have to have linebackers that can cover in space in today's NFL. If you don't have those guys, you're basically screwed because a lot of teams, like, it's not just the Seattle scheme, right? They play a lot of quarters defenses, a lot of defenses with split safety. Well, you need linebackers that can cover a lot of ground and be able to flip their hips and take people in man when they have to, zone, everything. And so because of that, we're seeing that off-ball linebackers are a big necessity. You need to have a fast one, unless you're the Green Bay Packers and you prefer to have these old school thumpers and sixth round, seventh round picks, but that's a conversation for another day.
Well, see, what I find weird though is, like the Packers clearly don't value that position. A team like the Eagles didn't really value that position. And when they went on their Super Bowl run, it's not like the linebacker was their best position. They were a front four team. Their defensive line was great, but they still had great contributions from like Nigel Bradham, and Malcolm Jenkins would slide into that role. And then you think of the Chiefs from last year. They didn't have a great or really good inside linebacker. They
It
they
was
had
really bad, actually.
they had Sorensen, right? So
Sorensen and Hitchens, yeah.
yeah, like I guess you can live without one, but it makes everything a lot easier when you do have one. I mean, you look at defenses that have had like Luke Kuechly, that have had Bobby Wagner, that have had Ray Lewis. Like those defenses seem to always be at least like average. Like bar none, they will always be average. Now there's other good guys on that team, like don't get me wrong, but they can fix a lot of the issues that, other guys have. And I think it's interesting hearing quarterbacks when they're at the line and hearing stories about how like they'll call an audible, and Luke Kuechly or Brian Urlacher will instantly call an audible knowing what it is, telling them, it's a run right or it's a run left and stuff like that. Like just how much of an impact that one person has on knowing what the offense is doing is just incredible.
Yeah, it's really awesome, and I think Fred Warner can eventually be one of those guys
Yeah.
if he continues on this arc over the next 4 or 5 years. So I'm really excited to see it. And again, it was a deal they had to get done, and I'm very glad they did get it done.
Agreed. But pushing away